The sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this honorable chamber was in standing finance committee. We revert to standing finance committee.
This Honourable House is now in standing finance committee. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'm obliged to you, sir. Minister, I had given you notice of the subject areas upon which I would request information. I want to deal first with the black belly sheep program in Guyana. And you're free to assume that I know the answers to these questions, except that I am asking on behalf of the people of this country. Last week, one of your colleagues in here, in an unscheduled intervention, stated that that program had connections with, I think he said, the Middle East, and that after the animals were slaughtered, prime cuts would be sold expensively to specific persons in the Middle East. I don't know if you heard him. I don't know if that is within your plan, but that is what he said. I'm not going to tell you yet. I hope, sir, they're not, while you're hearing them, I hope it is not eaten into my time.
I'm listening to you.
That honourable member purported to be speaking with great authority. I repeat, he said that that program had to do with prime cuts being taken from slaughtered lambs and sent to the Middle East. You say today that the carcasses after slaughter would be shipped back to Barbados. So what we don't know is whether the wealthy in the Middle East would get the prime cuts and that Barbadians would get the carcasses. I noted your language was very, very deliberate. You say the carcasses. So presumably the animals would be sent back here for us to ingest and devour the carcass. I'm going to ask you first if both you and the honourable member are correct, that the prime cuts would go to the Middle East and we would eat the carcass. I also want to ask you if all 743 sheep that were sent to Guyana are still alive, whether...
That's question number 2.
Beg your pardon?
That's question number 2.
No, this is the subject area. This is the subject area.
Okay, this one
subject area.
Proceed.
Lambs to Georgetown.
Honourable members, order.
I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable members, let the honourable member ask his question.
They're entitled, sir, to a little happiness. Until the people in Barbados are ready for them, they're entitled to be happy.
Proceed, Honourable Member.
Yes, thank you, sir. I did ask you if all 743 are still alive, since it is said that, and you will confirm this with the truth, since it is said that the environment, the Guyanese environment, was not conducive, and that they were living in waterlogged conditions, and that some of them died as a result of the hostile Guyana conditions. And the final part of that question would be, if they are in Guyana, and if all 743 are alive, at whose expense? Is it the Barbados government or the Guyana government? So if you remember the three parts of that question, I'd be happy if you could answer.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, first of all, let me dismiss outright that there's no relationship with the Middle East, with nothing to do with the black-bellied sheep that went to Guyana. I consider
you
it
can look to the
mischievous.
left while you answer that.
Pardon?
Look to your extreme left.
No, what
while
we
you correct the
do,
person.
Honourable Leader of Opposition, what we do in this chamber is that if we are making reference to any member, we say which member by mentioning the constituency.
No, I don't want you to be distracted by the identity of the member.
No, but
What's
in
said
that
here
case,
last week.
I
But that's
have,
not the issue.
in
That's
that
not the
case,
issue.
I have to remove myself from getting involved in mischief. Because if you cannot identify the honorable member, there's no charge for me to answer.
Well, don't answer. Just answer the portion of the
I
question.
told you there's no relationship with the Middle East.
There's none.
None.
Thank you very much.
But I cannot account for what.
Well, don't worry about him. Don't worry about him.
It is a him.
It is a he.
I thought it was a him. The other question you raised about the mortality,
Yes.
when the animals were shipped to Guyana, they were all alive, and they were sent to various farms. And when we last checked on them, the minister reported to me personally that the animals were in good health and they were doing well. We have to send Dr. McLean back to Guyana. What I do is take a report from him. And that report, after he goes down to visit all the locations, he'll report back to me the amount of lambings that they have had. He'll report back to me the rate of mortality and those things. He hasn't been able to go because at the time he was going, it coincided with us doing Argo Fest, and then with us preparing for Caribbean Latin America Conference with FAO.
Yes.
So that information will be made available. There's nothing at all.
I beg your
That
pardon. I missed
there's
what you
nothing
said.
at
He will
all.
report on the rate of mortality.
Yes.
So some have died.
No. Mortality speaks to whether or not any died. I don't know yet.
No, you say the rate of mortality.
Yes, if any had died, how many,
Right.
at what rate, whatever, right? But I don't have that information
I
yet.
see. A phone
All right.
call would suffice, but that's okay.
Okay. Now, the other part is the carcasses. I don't know if you misstate what I said about carcasses to mean bones, because you said that the cuts would be sent to the Middle East and we would devour the carcasses. Truth is that it is the whole sheep that we are going to get back. Okay, what we're doing is establishing a state-of-the-art abattoir in Barbados. Remember earlier I spoke about training butchers.
Yes.
So what happened is that we import a lot of cuts of lamb from New Zealand. Many times it is argued that we do not have the facility or the trained butchers to do the cuts that are required, especially in the tourism industry. So therefore, what will happen is that those carcasses will come back to us, and then we would do all the cuts that we import right now to service the domestic space.
Yes. And obviously there's going to be a cost to that. But on the question of costs, the third part of the question had been Who is paying for the present maintenance of these animals? The ones
All,
that are
all are
alive.
being maintained by the government of Guyana.
Guyana.
Yes.
There's no expense to the taxpayer of Barbados.
No, 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 none whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
None whatsoever.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sure that put your heart at ease.
Let us move to the second question. Medicinal marijuana or medical marijuana. Now, we do know that St. Vincent and Jamaica have developed industries which bring profit to those projects in those countries. And as I've said, you can assume that I know the answers to these questions, but I wish you to address the people of Barbados. And we ask you to confirm that the industry in Barbados, the medical marijuana industry in Barbados, has not effectively started. We ask you to confirm that. We ask you to confirm that until this industry gets started, that there's a monthly cost to government. We ask you, what is that monthly cost? We ask you, what are the costs thus far? And we ask you, what is the projected cost to the taxpayer until this industry gets started?
Couple of things. And I want to bring clarity to this conversation as well.
Yes, please.
I think Jamaica was the lead member CARICOM state that entered this space. They were the first. It took them well over 10 years to get the industry settled.
I see.
We entered the space somewhere late 2018, early 2019. It is not even a clear 6 years yet. Medicinal cannabis, getting into that space, whilst it is true that it can be lucrative business. I think the biggest challenge we face is how the US treats to this.
Oh, beg your
The
pardon?
United States of America, where in certain states, they have allowed for trade in medicinal cannabis to take place and have allowed for banking to take place.
Yes.
Whereas they have imposed restrictions on other jurisdictions. And when I visited Jamaica to look at what they were doing in their industry, the Minister of Agriculture then said to me that he believes that the only way we can resolve this problem is through CARICOM making a decision on how they're going to deal with it. We have, however, been able to forge ahead, similar to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I will speak to them also. St. Vincent and the Grenadines started this process ahead of us as well. I think it is only within the last year or two that they were able to land investment in the business. The reason why this is so, again, is because of the banking issues.
Yes.
We have started our process, and there are a number of things we're doing, which I'm going to ask Shanika Roberts-Odell, who's CEO acting at the MCLA, to speak to you about what we have been doing.
Thank you.
But the simple truth to all of this is that banking has become the major
impediment.
obstacle
Yes.
in terms of how we are able to develop the industry.
Thank you.
The medicinal cannabis industry has great potential. It's going to be a fairly sizable revenue earner for us. But again, in this, the enfranchisement of people similar to what we did in the sugar industry, we're working on a model that would allow for local persons who have exposure and experience in dealing with cannabis to be incorporated into the industry. And we are going to be working with the University of the West Indies as well in terms of doing our research on cultivars. So a lot of that work has begun. The business model that's being created for the locals is also being worked on with the BMCLA and the planning unit at the ministry. And that is gonna be a game changer as well for Barbadians. So I would ask Ms. Shanika Roberts-Odle to speak to you. The spend on the Cannabis Licensing Authority and all the work that we are doing annually is about $3.4 million.
3.4 million annually. And since we have that figure, what have been the costs thus far?
That's the budgeted annual cost.
3.4.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Over 6 years.
It's not 6 years yet.
5.
Approximately 4.5, 5 years.
4.5, 5. Okay, we'll say 5. All right, so that we've spent in excess of $15 million thus far.
3.4 per year. If that's what the math gets you, then fine.
Thank you very much. And you did say that Jamaica took 10 years, so is it possible that we could project another 5 years?
I think we are doing better than the other jurisdictions in terms of how we will get there.
Yes.
Because they are the ones leading the fight in terms of the banking issues. So that once this is settled, then I think we should get there faster. We do have cases where investors are actually ready to invest, but the truth is banking is the obstacle.
Yes. And to use a cliche, there's no end in sight unless we do it, we resolve it as the Jamaicans suggested to you through CARICOM.
Through CARICOM, yeah.
Yes.
Or what I am looking at is how we can do other things. Like, for example, through the Barbados Drug Service, for example, you can use medicines that contain cannabis.
Yes.
So we are looking at some options to see how we can work out so that people can actually get going. I do believe, and Mrs. Roberts-Odle can speak to this, but there is also some protocol with the drug service.
Thank you. I appreciate your candor that some $17 million later, we're still making our efforts. And I wish you well. I do wish you well.
I think what you may want to consider, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, is that if you spend $17 million in research and development and to build an industry, I've actually started to pave a way for an industry that can give you back faster and greater return on that 17 million. Most people who enter business who recognize that based on what an industry can deliver, are prepared to invest what is required in order for them to be able to take advantage of the opportunities to get the returns on the investment. So putting in $17 million to build up an industry, employ people, and then do research on cultivars and stuff like that, I don't think that is unreasonable at all.
Fair enough, fair enough. And you were about to tell us when you think we would get started. You said we probably would do better than Jamaica, who took 10 years. Would you tell us?
I don't think
6 years?
we would take 10 years.
You don't think so?
No.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So, Mrs. Roberts-Odle.
Thank you very much, Minister. With regard to the medicinal cannabis industry, we have spent our time setting up the industry to succeed. We have continuously been in contact with our agencies, sister agencies in Jamaica and St. Vincent, along with the others who are starting in other regions. And we have learned from them. One of the most important
Officer,
things...
I hate to interrupt your smooth flowing, but you need to give your name and your position for the records of the House. Thank you.
No problem. My name is Shanika Roberts-Odle. I'm currently the acting CEO of the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority. Thank you. And so we've spent our time learning from them and working in conjunction with the other regions, the other islands. And so what we have done, and to advance what the minister's point is, to look at the issues that they have had starting up. And one of the things that we have also realized is in some cases, they would have started an industry, in some cases without standards, and had to come back and peel back and go again. And I believe that there's one of our institutions in the region who has on their third round of cannabis legislation, and another which is on their second round of cannabis legislation. And what that indicates to me is what we have always said in the BMCLA. We are not all-knowing nor all-seeing. If someone else is, they can feel free to let me know. And so what we do is we take our time, we communicate, and we build the industry, because that is what you are essentially doing. Building an industry in an environment in which there is prejudice and there is confusion surrounding the context of medicinal cannabis. Additionally, there is a lot of misinformation. There is the concept of green gold and cannabis and money flowing in the streets. And we have had to go about our mission in terms of having conversations with those who already cultivate in their various forms, and to get them to understand that what you are cultivating, I'm sure you have skill in that area. But when you're cultivating something for someone's medical health, it has to be to a standard. The same way someone wants to know what's in their Advil, they want to know what's in their medicinal cannabis. And henceforth, as I said, we're building an industry from the ground up. So we have had to go through the process of putting in place training. We've managed this year to secure, last year, to secure an MOU with the SJPI. And we have gone through our work with TVET in creating a standard and creating a training program that can transfer that knowledge. That doesn't mean that we don't respect people's knowledge in cultivating cannabis that they may have been cultivating for a great number of years. What that means is that we need them to understand that if you're going to cultivate for someone's health, then it has to be of a standard. And there's an international standard in terms of making that so. So when you're building from an industry, as I said, you have to build from the ground up. We've made a serious relationship through an MOU with the Barbados Drug Service. And that MOU making sure that we don't recreate the wheel. That creates a close relationship with the Barbados Drug Service and the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority. That means even though we are building an industry, we are allowing patients who are desperate, who are in need of care and in need of this now recognized medicine to be able to have access to that through the Barbados Drug Service. And so we have not rested on our laurels. We have continued to create relationships, to look at the manner in which things are done, and to create common sense pathways for Barbadians who are patients and for Barbadians who are business persons to be involved. Now, does that mean there are not issues? Most definitely there are issues. The minister spoke to them. But I would say that if we talk about the fact that we need to diversify, and it is something we've talked about tremendously as a country and as a nation, it needs initiative. And this is one of the initiatives that have been put forward. And the BMCLA continues to strive to make sure that we are making ourselves known and that we are making sure we are taking care of the industry insofar as we can. And that is the clear truth of the matter. We have, at present, 11 licensees and 33 licenses, one of which was supremely important, which is the University of the West Indies in their research and development license. The University of the West Indies is already ready and poised as one of the few universities licensed to conduct cannabis research and development to be able to assist us in moving this industry forward. But as the minister stated himself, there are issues. There is no way around that. But we do not stop at a stumbling block. We continue to go over, under, or through. And with the minister's leadership, we shall continue to do so.
Thank you. I would just follow up by commenting, Your Honor, that it would seem now to the people of Barbados that the Barbados government went into medicinal marijuana unprepared. If they did not anticipate the banking obstacle, to quote the minister, I want to be able to say this to a chamber that is reasonably well behaved. If the Barbados government went into this project not appreciating, as others had done, that there would have been a banking obstacle, it stands to reason that we were unprepared. And I add to that, that it seems, Minister, I'm sorry to say this to you, that we may have missed out. We may have missed out. You may have a different view, but it seems that way to me. Turn on your mic, please. You did not hear me. No, not a mistake. Well, I said you were unprepared, having not appreciated the banking obstacle, to quote you. It may be that the Barbados government was unprepared for the industry, for the obstacles that present themselves. And my fear is that this industry is unlikely to get off the ground at any time soon, if at all, $17 million later.
My response to you, first of all, is that when I presented the paper for the medicinal cannabis industry, there was already one that went to the cabinet for the government before us. And certainly there were the banking issues then.
Yes.
So what you're actually saying then is that if we didn't prepare for it, I don't think that the previous administration prepared for it either, but they prepared a paper that went to cabinet to start a medicinal cannabis industry as well. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. Medicinal cannabis is not the industry that is confronted with banking issues, okay? And therefore, there are things that we have to work on. If you speak to international business, if you speak to all of the hurdles that we have to jump over in terms of how they treat anti-money laundering and those types of things, you will see that banking restrictions are real.
Yes.
So that what my focus is really is how we are gonna find a mechanism through which we will tackle this problem. And I've been having meetings with the Bankers Association, and we are looking, they have given to us some areas that we can work on together. And once we can settle those, I'm confident that we will have a solution.
I admire your optimism. May we come to the third issue? Yes, of course. May we come to the third issue? And I want to label this broadly under food production, and to remind that you may have told this chamber and this country that you're happy with the food production figures. I think we can quote you accurately as saying that.
I'm overjoyed.
Overjoyed.
24% increase is not something to sniff at.
Right. All right, let's not sniff yet. Nor sniffle. Food production, you're overjoyed at the rate of production. I have to ask you though, Barbadians do like this, the sweet potato. Barbadians love that. And you will confirm or deny that sweet potato production was down at the end of last year. You may confirm or deny that. And I want to say to you, Minister, that on the question of food security, if we are in decline, and if our food import bill is rising, that exacerbates the problem related to food security. And as a related issue, we wish you to comment on the Suriname project, related as it is to food production, that there had been a plan to have Barbadians relocate themselves to Suriname to grow food crops of whatever sort, and that those food crops would then be transported back to Barbados, whether by sea or by air. Either way, it would have been extremely expensive. In a context where food security seems rather uncertain and frightening, despite the fact that you're overjoyed, could you please tell us what is the true state of food production in this country, whether it has declined from previous years of boom, and what has happened to the Suriname project? Is that, like the cannabis industry, almost dead?
Honourable Member, you clearly didn't listen to my presentation this morning.
I did, but I want you to tell the truth.
Well, you want me to tell the truth? Are you
Yes.
saying that I lied in my presentation?
No, I'm not saying
this
you lied.
morning?
In response to this question, I'm
But
asking you to tell the truth.
I said this morning.
I'm not accusing you of having lied this morning. I want you to tell the truth
this morning,
now.
local farmers produced 20.1 million kilograms of agricultural commodities. The production that we have had is only better in 2020. 2008 all the way down did not better what we have done. I became Minister of Agriculture in 2018. So your administration didn't even do half as good as what we did, okay? The best your administration had was around 2009 when we did an experiment with one crop, what is it, Christophines, I think it is.
Yes.
Other than that, this administration has surpassed everything that was done by your administration.
And you will let the applause continue when you tell us about the Suriname project and how much it is costing the government of this country every year.
I ain't finished with production yet.
Well, you will come to that after you finish with that.
The 21% increase in yields in 2023 marks a rebound, okay? And marked the 4th increase in crop production in Barbados since 2018, okay? Now, I don't know where you are getting your information from, but to be very honest with you, Honourable Member, the performance in this sector was only challenged for 2 consecutive years during COVID. Each and every year after, we have been seeing results. Prior to that, we were at our peak with 30 million kilograms of production in 2020. We had never seen it between the period 2008 and 2018. And I want to make that very clear. In Suriname, the Broker-Ponder Agreement was signed with an administration that wanted to work with Barbados. Since then, there was an election, the government changed, and the government in power took a different policy position on that. They are not prepared to have lands given for people to come and work without their having some kind of stake in it. The previous government was actually working with Barbados to empower farmers going there to do production, where then Suriname would have purchased from those farmers and they can then send back to Barbados. The Suriname arrangement does not cost the government of Barbados anything. We have not invested money in a project in Suriname because the government changed when we were about to do the project. And they weren't prepared to come back to the table with the same arrangement.
I see. And you are about to tell us as to the cost to the Barbados government of the continuing Suriname project.
Well, as it stands right now, we haven't settled a project yet, so there's no cost to the government.
There isn't somebody in Suriname overseeing the possibility of a project?
No, not from my ministry, not through this government, sir.
You sure about that?
I'm absolutely clear.
Okay.
There may be somebody that you might be more familiar with than I do, because if there is somebody, there might be somebody associated with your side.
What
And,
side?
and,
My
I,
left
and, I,
side or
and
my
one
right side?
possible name is going through my head.
Don't call it, not here. So what you're saying to us is that Suriname is off, it's dead.
No, I'm saying that we have to renegotiate how we deal with Suriname now. But since we've been dealing with Suriname, we are well advanced with Guyana and what we are doing in Guyana.
No, I'm not talking about Guyana.
I know, but I'm
asking you-
saying to you that since we did not get off the ground with the project because of the change in government, We found an option in Guyana, and we are well on the way.
Right, so you are saying that the Suriname project is off.
I ain't saying that. I am saying we have to settle what the government in Barbados will agree on. And as it stands right now, the current government of Suriname, okay, is not using back the same agreement that we had under the Broker Pond agreement with the previous government. So it's for them then to settle what it is they want out of the project.
So that the present government in Suriname is not, to quote you, using back the agreement, so it is off.
Well, it will be
Nothing
off.
is happening, it's
It will
not
be off
existent.
if we discontinue the negotiations. But
No,
it
you're
is not-
negotiating,
Yes.
but you negotiate a contract, but anyhow, don't bother about the law. It is off. It is off. Don't look at them. Look. These are the well-behaved ones. Look at them sometimes. Thank you. Emulate them.
Would you do the same?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. Well-behaved people. Don't worry about them. They should know
We
better
haven't
to be
taken it
frank
off
with you.
the table yet, Honourable.
Look, tell them that this is a legitimate
Honourable Leader of the
exercise.
Opposition, you cannot
Wait.
refer to honourable members as them. That
Those
is
ones, those honourable
unparliamentary.
members on that side who are misbehaving. This is a legitimate exercise, Minister. Tell your honourable colleagues that.
Honourable
That we're
member.
entitled to ask questions.
Yes,
and that
Honour-
when we ask questions, we expect answers.
Honourable member, accept that I will not allow you to put the answer in my mouth.
I'm not criticizing you. I'm not criticizing you. I'm criticizing those who fail to behave themselves and recognize that this is a legitimate exercise. And we're entitled to do this. That underlies the entire concept of parliamentary democracy, that you come here and tell the public of Barbados how its money is being spent, not to be murmuring and behaving like children in response to legitimate questions. On your behalf, I apologize. That's all, Your Honor. Ignore the, that's all.
Honourable member,
That's
thank
all.
you. Honourable member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Chair, I thank you for recognizing me. I just want to join, before I actually pose my questions, in commending the Minister of Agriculture and his team for the stellar work they've been doing in the area. Minister, was actually listening to you when you spoke initially, and you did indicate that we were seeing significant gains in agriculture and an increase in crop production and harvesting and yields. So I don't know, sir, who or what the honourable member for Christchurch South was actually listening to. And perhaps if he focused a bit more on what was happening in here and a bit less on probably the anonymous tips he's getting that seem to be walking him into trouble, then we might be a little bit more productive. I almost felt embarrassed that we have a whole Minister of Agriculture in the well and a whole team of civil servants, senior civil servants and persons who are, judging by their appearance, very serious-minded and knowledgeable. And we are down, sir, to the ridiculous charade of asking how many sheep died, what are they from, what were their names. I mean, sir, it's almost the point where it could not even be more ridiculous. I was tempted, sir, to interrupt just for the purpose of advancing the session and ask the honourable member if there was a particular sheep you had an interest in and what was its name. But, sir, I'm glad that we've moved past that, and I wish we could be, sir, a lot more serious in these exercises. But to pose a serious question to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and his team. Minister, government is perhaps the largest landowner in Barbados. And we do have people complaining all the time bitterly about overgrown lots and lots that are covered in bush and cowitch and whatnot. And this is not to the point of regulation or enforcement. I'm asking, is there a plan to put some of these lots that might be in prime agriculture areas back in to crop production? What does that look like? What, do you have any estimates to do that? Because quite frankly, I would love to see a lot of the areas that are really bushy, overgrown, and are posing a threat to some persons and neighborhoods properly cultivated and with crops growing on them. So I just want to know what is in it this year to put those lots, as many of those lots as possible, back into crop production to A, reduce the nuisance, and B, further increase the agricultural potential in Barbados and food security.
Thank you, Honourable Member. First of all, there is a conversation that is taking place with the farmers, particularly those with large plantations, to address this whole issue of bringing back land into production. We looked at how we can clear those lands, what will be required to clear them, and the types of crops that can possibly grow on those lands. One of the major issues for us really is water. And many of the lands that are out of production either don't have a well or we do not have access to water so that they can be provided with water. The government is working on a water augmentation program for farmers where we can do reservoirs, and we've started that process so that the farmers can have access to water. But you do note that a lot of the lands that are out of production were previously sugarcane fields. And because sugar lost its preferential treatment, many of the farmers then went out of farming because they didn't care to continue with crop production for the domestic space. Now, we looked at what can be done, because it is true that some farmers don't have the financial resources, especially some of those large plantations. And there's always a misconception that because it's a large plantation, the people got money. But you do recall how the government had to bail out a lot of them on many occasions. And that is the reason why, first of all, the Barbados Development Bank had to intervene, and then the Barbados National Bank, which is now Republic Bank, which then led government to owning a lot of lands that were previously owned by those plantation owners. We're looking at how we can plant forage for the dairy industry. And if we can bring back 535 acres of land just doing grass for the dairy industry. And then equally, we're looking at how we can plant other crops like cassava and in some instances, cane grass. Cane grass has a high calorific value, and if we are moving to energy, then there are private farmers who are saying that they would like to participate in the renewable energy space, and therefore they have started some trials with cane grass, but cane grass can also be used for feeding animals. And then we've looked at areas where we can do mapping using drones to see how we can then do a surveillance program to clear the lands and reach our target, which is set for 2030, to have all good arable land back into production, planting something, be it grass, be it food, or be it fruit trees. And this is a conversation that is currently taking place with all of those farmers who own large tracts of land. In addition to this, we already have some zones within the Ministry of Agriculture that we have developed for the feed program. And those areas are like Mount Poyer, Spencer's, Bath, Spring Hall as well, River Plantation, and you would see Lears as well, where we do have a large reservoir at Lears. They're clearing Lears to get that back into production to meet the rain that is coming. And they're also clearing Spencer's as well. So there is a lot of work going on, Honourable Member, to make sure that we can bring back lands into production and to see us reaching our 25 by the year 2025 target of reducing the food import bill by 25%, but equally creating an opportunity for small farmers to be empowered.
That was in relation to the government land. So I have a parallel, a spin-off question from that. Are there any incentives to private landowners to put agricultural lands back into production? We've seen a lot of them coming out of production. In many instances, I have heard the stories that, quite frankly, the monkeys reap more of the crops than the private farmers. I was curious as to why a particular farmer didn't utilize his entire acreage to plant, and I wonder why was he actually setting back about 20 feet from the road to start his crop cultivation. And he explained to me, it wasn't that he set back 20 feet from the road, that's what the monkeys already harvested. So it is a real thing that people have come out, farmers have come out of farming based on your projections and what it is that you are trying to do in terms of food security. Do you or your ministry have incentives to encourage the private farmers who have dropped out of cultivation to put their lands back into cultivation?
There are two things at play here, Honourable Member. There are some people who have land that just have no interest in agriculture. And so you will find that they will keep the land, allow it to run fallow, and then perhaps wait for an opportunity to apply for subdivision. As a given, it takes place frequently, and we have to push back on that type of behavior. And then there are people who are more interested in leasing the land to small farmers rather than take on the responsibility of doing farming themselves because they have been attracted to other types of businesses. And then, of course, you have the issues where because the land is not as good for agriculture, then people look for other options, and that's where renewable energy is taking up some space, and that's a conversation we can have. The issue with monkeys we dealt with already this morning. You are well aware of the program that we have in place for controlling the
That was just by
monkey
reference. You don't need to go back in there.
And as far as we are concerned, the ministry's work in getting land back into production is being done in conjunction with the landowners and also with our stakeholders who we meet with to come up with solutions. That's the reason why Spencer's has now come on board. Spencer's otherwise would have been just lying fallow, and Bath as well. And we have taken to giving those two areas for people to do farming, where the government did all the cultivation, preparation of land, give the drips, and also assisted with the planting material as well, and provided water tanks for the farmers to have access to water because the areas that didn't have water. What we are continuing to do is provide incentives. Perhaps Mr. Connolly can speak to the suite of incentives that we have at the ministry so you get an understanding of what we do to assist farmers to keep them in farming or even to get into farming. Mr. Connolly.
The ministry has an incentive program. Arlie Connolly, officer in charge of Extension Services Unit. We have a incentive program. There's an incentive for bringing lands back into cultivation. There's incentives for irrigation. There's incentives for clearing the land if the land has on trees and you need to use an excavator or like that type of machine to clear it. There's a rebate for that as well. There's a whole list of incentives put in place for farmers in terms of getting land back into production. Along with the cultivation, there's, as I said, there's irrigation, there's land clearance, there is new crop technology for putting down greenhouses, and the list goes on. The rebates vary. The irrigation is approximately 50%. The land clearance is between $404 per acre for land clearance. The cultivation varies because it depends on the operation, whether it be plowing, whether it be cultivating, furrowing. Each operation has its own rebate.
Thank you. Just keeping it in that line. I'm asking this as the leader of the opposition does, because people ask me, what are the avenues for persons seeking to get, small persons who are trying to be entrepreneurs, seeking to get funding to go into farming? There are a lot of people who may see that as an avenue out of poverty. They might see that as something they can't get what they consider a traditional job, and they want to try their hand at farming. What opportunities for funding or guidance exist within the ministry to help persons who might be interested in starting small farming, starting up as farmers?
Well, first of all, Honourable Member, we started a program called the Farmers Empowerment and Enfranchisement Drive, where the acronym is FEED. And many people, young people who wanted to get involved in agriculture came through that training program and were able to receive land, have the land prepared at no cost to them, were given the drip, given access to water through the tanks that we've delivered. So they essentially came in with everything provided, and that would have given them a start. However, if there are people who need to find additional funding, the government also started the Trust Loans Program, where people can get small loans as well to get into any type of business, agriculture being one. And the last report that I had from the Trust Loans Program, quite a few people went through that program to get loans to start a project in agriculture. And then for those big ones, people who are doing large-scale commercial agriculture, there's the Agriculture Development Fund, which is managed through Enterprise Growth Fund. And that fund is available for people who are doing projects well above $100,000, $200,000. So there is funding available, and there are some grants as well. Under the UN, for example, community projects, there are grants that are given to community projects in agriculture, and we have quite a few in Barbados that have already started with support from the UN. And then, of course, the ministry's work with the farmers, which is at no cost to them, continues in the FEED program and in Project CARE.
Thank you. Honourable Member, when I asked about getting land back into production, you indicated that one of the headaches or issues is access to water. In a previous dispensation, I had a particular interest in water, and I'm aware that a lot of the wells on the plantations or the water wells have been blocked up. Just for the reference of people, if you see a freshly cut cane field and you see a patch in the middle with trees growing up, chances are that is where a well was and is now overgrown. So we have a lot of the plantations that have not maintained their wells. I know there used to be a subsidy that allowed persons to maintain and clean wells. And I do believe that your ministry, in combination with the ministry responsible for water, right, need to do a push to ensure that there is a well cleaning, well maintenance program, especially on the plantations. It benefits the aquifers, it helps to reduce flooding, and it also provides the the catchment for that important resource in agriculture, which is water. So what programs are there to assist persons in bringing their wells back into productive use, where the wells might have just silted up over the course of time, or people filled in the wells because it was cheaper to fill in and not maintain the well than to have it there. So I'm just wondering what is there under your ministry in particular to actually encourage the reorientation of these wells and bringing the wells back into productive use for the benefit of all of us.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We still have incentives in place for people to clear wells or clean wells on their property. And many of the large plantations usually use that incentive. There was also a program under the BAMC, which was called the NICART program, where we did clearing of wells on all BAMC farms. And that program included a cuscus grass project as well for planting cuscus grass around the hedgerows. So that there is still available access to incentives for cleaning wells. And we are looking now at revisiting the NICART program after we've completed the sugar transitioning to see how we can bring back that program and be able to allow for the cleaning of wells to continue, but equally continue the planting of cuscus grass and lemongrass as well, and also look at how we can then develop other plants that are indigenous to Barbados, like aloe vera, for example. And so we work with the farmers. We provide incentives for them. I think one of the farmers told me that what they do is that they go over and beyond what they get in incentives, and that's a conversation that I'm also having with them to see if we can carve out another type of support for those ones who go beyond what is required. Some of them go as far as putting wells in public spaces where there's no well for drainage, and they underwrite the cost of all of that on their own. So I'm speaking to them, and we can look at how we can carve out a space to look at addressing those issues where you get large flooding in areas when it's heavy downpour, and some plantations have already undertaken the responsibility of doing their own drainage to address flooding.
Thank you. What I will say is that this is something that needs to be looked at as hurricane season approaches again. We had a couple of sharp showers yesterday, and once the rain falls in heavy in a short space of time in Barbados, it floods. So from a number of different angles, I think it is critical for us to get the wells back into operation, and I believe you may actually need to reassess the true cost now of cleaning the well. I don't think that the amount provided for bears any necessary reference right now to the actual cost of cleaning the well, and that might be something we need to look at because it's more than just an agricultural issue. It's one of disaster preparedness, and it's also one of water security. But I thank you for your response. I must say that unlike others in here, I am comfortable that you're an agent of truth, and you will not find me back in here tomorrow even suggesting that following what happened today after some message or calls that I now believe that you're lying. So I thank you very much for your responses, and I'm prepared to hang my hat on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. First, I want to thank the Minister for the work that he's doing in St. John, particularly Wakefield, on 2 counts, repurposing all of those fields that were lying idle, and then the work that is happening with Project Phoenix. I'm almost afraid, Chair, to ask my sheep question, but I'll go. I just want to know what is happening in relation to tanning. I believe there's scope for some of our young people to get involved in this particular area. I have 1 or 2 plantation buildings in St. John that are idle. And I'm wondering what would be the process, Minister, to start a tanning project in the constituency of St. John for some of the youngsters who are unemployed? My first question.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That is something that we would have to sit down and consider. It's certainly not something that we have in our immediate plans. But what I would do is ask Dr. McLean, who would have done significant work in this area, who actually was previously working on similar projects to address the matter. And what I can assure you is that we can go back and look at it and see how viable it can be and what we can do to move it along if necessary. Dr. McLean.
Thank you, Minister. Leroy McLean, Consultant Minister of Agriculture. Minister, actually as part of the Black Belly Sheep program, you would know that the ultimate goal is to be able to establish a high-quality leather industry using the hides of the black belly sheep. And I must say that last time I was in Guyana, I was able to meet with some person who has actually been doing some work with tanning. It was not at the quality which we would want for the high-quality hides, but certainly there are persons around the region who are skilled in this regard, and we could possibly look at engaging them in training some Barbadians. Some years ago, some persons were trained through the PIDC in India, and I know that there's only one person, I think he's a teacher at one of our secondary schools, who still has some knowledge of this area. And when we sent skins off to Canada to be tanned, he actually did a preparation. Now, one of the problems that we have with tanning is that most of the tanning uses some very strong chemicals. And so we're always concerned about the possibility of these chemicals with heavy metals getting into our water supply. So this is why there's never been any large-scale tanning in Barbados. But certainly, there's room for small scale. And now we have techniques available where people are doing what's called organic tanning. And interestingly enough, one of the things that is used in this organic tanning is liquid from soaking the bark of river tamarind, so which can be used as a tanning agent. So, as the minister said, it's something that we could pay some more attention to and utilize what resources are here, as well as any that would be available in the region to undertake the kind of project that Honourable Member is suggesting.
Thank you. My second question, Minister, is related to beekeeping. Now, at Wakefield, Project Phoenix, adjacent the lands, there's a large area of mango trees. And at the last meeting with these farmers, they expressed an interest in starting a project as it relates to beekeeping. What is required for those youngsters to be trained, and then how would they be able to access hives to start a project at Wakefield and in other areas of St. John for that matter?
Yeah, we are doing work in apiculture. Brett Taylor is here. I will let him speak to you about what is being done. And in terms of participation, and equally, there are some beekeepers that we had in the feed program as well. So if necessary, Mr. Frederick Ennis can also speak. Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Minister. Brett Taylor, Senior Agricultural Officer at the Ministry of Agriculture. In regards to the question that the honourable member posed, we have trained a number of persons over the years in beekeeping. Suffice to say, I remember going to St. John early in our training program when we had a training exercise at your thing there. What I must say is that as long as the persons send the names, they send an address, they send a telephone number saying that they're interested in beekeeping to us, we would then, once we have a cohort, we put on a training session for them over a week or more, introducing them to basic beekeeping from some of our officers and also from one of our former officers who is very skilled in beekeeping. In terms of providing hives, we had a training cohort just over 6 months ago that each person in that cohort left with a hive. Okay, so we provided them with startup material. I am, however, sorry to report that some of the persons that we have trained and even given hives to start, when we did do our checks, they have not progressed any further. So that is one of the issues that we face also. Persons have been trained, but when you do follow up to check on them, they have not taken up the beekeeping road, they have not progressed into getting more hives for themselves. Also, one of the things I must say is that you spoke about the large mango grove there, which might be a good area for keeping bees, but mangoes are mainly pollinated by flies, not necessarily bees. Bees do go, but they're mainly pollinated by flies. So if you're looking to put bees there, we must have other types of forage material around that the bees would also go to. So in essence, if persons want to be trained in beekeeping, just call the Ministry of Agriculture and they can give their names and telephone number. And once we have a cohort available, we can put on a training session for them. Thank you.
So my follow-up question, you mentioned the training session. Would this be, so if I have like 10, 15 people, this can be done at location in St. John, or they would have to come to Graham Hall?
Usually we will have it at Graham Hall.
That's it from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member, St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank the Ministry of Agriculture for the open-mindedness and the collaboration that they've demonstrated with regards to working with some of our schools. As you will know, Mr. Chairman, we have asked that every school, primary, secondary, and nursery, have some kind of agricultural program, no matter how small, no matter how large, no matter how high-tech, no matter how low-tech. And we know that involving students in food security and agriculture, particularly sustainable agricultural practices at an early age, that it really lays the foundation for a more food secure Barbados. And there are many benefits. Education, there's awareness about where food comes from and agricultural processes. They get life skills, they learn responsibility, they learn problem solving, they learn how to care for the environment. There's health and nutrition. We're finding that a number of the students at the schools, they want to eat what they're growing, and therefore we're getting that there is some benefit in terms of better habits. There's community engagement, and we are seeking to expand the level of community engagement in our schools. I say all that, Mr. Chairman, to get to a question. First of all, the first question is that of, I know the minister and I have been speaking about programs, expanding the programs for schools and agriculture. Currently, through the 4-H, which I believe your ministry, they give a transfer to the 4-H club annually. We have them only in 11 of our primary schools, in 3 of our secondary schools, and in 1 of our nursery schools. And my question with regards to the 4-H program is, do you see there being an opportunity at this time for us to expand the support for the 4-H program across the schools?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yes, the ministry is continuing to work with the 4-H movement. And we are also doing some work with the Ministry of Education as well to expand agriculture and get agriculture into a lot of the schools. We have the greenhouses that I spoke of this morning, which we are going to set up at schools as well. But what I would do is let the permanent secretary speak to the 4-H support, and he can give details on what is happening there.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Minister. Terry Bascom, and I'm the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry. Honourable Member, I'm glad you mentioned 4-H, and you are correct. Sometimes when we speak about agriculture and improving on agriculture, we tend to forget the contribution of the youth, and we sometimes focus on the large farmers and those types of entities without sometimes giving enough credit to that organization called the 4-H movement. The ministry continues to support the 4-H. Each year there is a subvention of $200,000. Hopefully we can increase that at some point in time, but at present it's $200,000 that we transfer to them annually, $50,000 on a quarterly basis. The 4-H is not only of great value to the ministry because of the contribution that it makes to agriculture, but there's also a very, and I have to say this, there's a sentimental attachment to the 4-H group. One of its former long-standing chairman, Mr. Alvin Romeo, who was one of the most loved officers at the ministry and one of the best-known extension officers in this country. We said farewell to him only a few weeks ago. And it was at that funeral service that I learned that throughout the many years that he was actually chairman of the 4-H group, he actually only missed one meeting. And it was really sad but heartening at the same time to hear that. So that I'll say to you, Honourable Member, if only from that perspective, we feel really close to the 4-H group. And the challenge that they're facing now, though, is that as a result of the redevelopment of the Queen's Park in the city, that's where they were housed. They were relocated to the old town hall building in further downtown. And I think that it has impacted them adversely because they received written correspondence from one of their administrators indicating that that move has kind of impaired on the amount of activities that they can now continue to participate in. It hasn't stopped them altogether, but one would accept that where it was previously located, Queen's Park, Central, you know, he would say to me, well, the older people, especially the women, would just get off the bus stop, come there, to avoid actually going through the rigors of town, and just get on a bus and go with their plants and their seedlings, etc. So I had engaged my counterpart at the Ministry of Housing and Lands and Maintenance, and we discussed this, and I'm very pleased, I was pleased to hear that the Prime Minister had already given the instruction that the 4-H is to be relocated and that they're to be taken care of. So yes, 4-H continues to be a significant part of the agriculture family, and we will continue to support them, recognizing that they cater significantly to that cohort of persons that we need to pay attention to. Women who naturally have the ability to nurture and foster growth, and then the children, younger persons that we would want to mature into productive farmers in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, because as you know, the 4-H has brought structure to some of the significant work that we've done through the school. So thank you for the support you're offering there. In addition, just in December just gone, we launched in collaboration with your Ministry of Agriculture a project that is supported by CARICOM and CARDI, and that is the project that is for the promotion of agricultural production systems that are climate resilient and weather sensitive. And we launched the very first at Welch's Primary School in December. And we know that there are other schools that are to come on board, another 8, 9 that will come on board both at the primary and the secondary level. And that is work that you continue to do with us. Right now we have hydroponic systems set up at Welch's as well as the more traditional farming, and the children are having a ball. And as I said, as the other 8 or 9 schools come on board, we thank you, and we are wondering whether there is any provision for that program to be expanded through the ministry at this time.
Yes, Honourable Member. Again, just to repeat, we have a significant focus on the youth. And we do recognize that a lot of the current farming population is aging. And if we're gonna follow the trend where agriculture has become and is continuing to develop to be highly technological in nature, then it makes sense to engage the youth who have a greater propensity towards embracing the technology. So yes, the answer in a nutshell. And that is one of the reasons why, as the minister spoke earlier to our Shade House project, what you will see when the deployment really, or the rollout really gets going, is that a significant number of them will be deployed at educational institutions. And I use that broader term rather than just schools, because we're gonna deploy some of them at primary schools. There are secondary schools on the list. There's the SJPI on the list, and there's the Barbados Community College. So that we're making sure that we touch all the bases from primary right up to the tertiary level, so that that chain is not broken as we seek to develop agriculture right through. So yes, that particular initiative will continue, and there will be other dimensions as we embrace more of the technology associated with the sector.
And through you, Chair, to the Minister, he and I have had some very exciting conversations, and even in recent weeks, with regards to predial larceny. And I ask this on behalf of one of my farmers in the Halton region, who has been having significant problems. As you know, in St. Philip West, correct, where there has been he has lost significant amounts of money. He's actually leasing out certain aspects of the plantation there and areas, and has lost because of significant problems with predial larceny. And my question is, how do we further provide some support or some help to address this problem of predial larceny? I know that the ministry has been doing significant work. Can you share with us what you've done and what else can we do to help the farmers at this stage?
Thank you, Honourable Member. First thing is that we've passed the legislation which now gives the Barbados Police Service the power to implement the legislation and to deal with people who are engaging in crop theft. The hardcore reality is that you do need intelligence, and I've said this over and over. You may recall there was an incident with persons stealing yam, and they were caught, and then it ended up in the fatal loss of 2 members who were at the time in the field. Now, you'll be surprised to know that one of those persons is indeed a farmer. So that you do have situations where there are people who are engaged in farming who would have information on where crops are ready to be harvested. And they actually try to outbeat the other farmer by participating in predial larceny. And that is a hardcore problem that has been drawn to my attention by many of the farmers who are currently planting. The other problem is that we have a project working with the Barbados Police Service and the Defense Force, which is called Operation Birdseye. And that project basically is where predial larceny is known to be taking place. The Barbados Police Service and the Barbados Defense Force actually would do surveillance at certain times because crop theft takes place at certain times in the night. And you would find that if you follow the trend, it is oftentimes very early in the morning or very deep into the night. And the Barbados Police Service has been working with us. We met with them on more than one occasion. Since the legislation has been passed, as I've said before, it is now is a good time for us to come back and meet with them again. The legislation also allows for people to demand proof of purchase. So that, let's say, for example, you went to Farm Gate and purchased 1,000 kilos of sweet potato. At Farm Gate, you should have some form of receipt as proof that you purchased that from whichever farm. And if stopped by the police, you're supposed to produce that receipt. If you cannot produce that receipt, then you're given time to show the police where you got the produce from. I think it is within 24 hours. And then you may be prosecuted if you can't provide proof of actually purchasing or growing those crops. The other thing is that the penalties have been increased, so a person can be fined up to $100,000 now. But the biggest problem we have is where people facilitate crop theft. And similar to breaking in somebody's house or somebody doing some other type of crime, you will find oftentimes people may know who is doing it, but invariably prefer to remain silent. And then there are those people who benefit as well, because people who are involved in crop theft oftentimes are doing it because they know somebody that is going to purchase it from them. And then that person goes off then to do the vending. And when I say the person goes off to do the vending, I'm not necessarily trying to suggest that this is a practice by vendors. I'm saying there are people who will purchase stolen crops. They know that it is stolen, and they purchase it because of the profits that they can make after selling those crops. A number of things can be done. First of all, I think Barbadians have their part to play in this. You can demand a receipt from a person selling you produce. So let's say that you drive along anywhere and you want to purchase some avocado. The person selling the avocado under this legislation must be able to produce some form of receipt or some form of proof that they obtain those supplies through fair and clean means. And if they can't produce it, then the onus on you to be a responsible citizen and say, well, I can't buy it. And oftentimes people buy produce and they don't even know what they're getting into, because there are instances when crops are sprayed. A person stealing those crops has no interest in whether or not they were sprayed. But if you proceed to purchase them, then you're actually purchasing a crop that has pesticides. So, I mean, I urge Barbadians really to take a more serious look at what they're doing and look at their purchasing practices as well. And whilst I am not here to deprivate anyone who is involved in the sale of agricultural produce, the legislation alone cannot solve the problem. We have to then have responsible citizens equally involved in making sure that they demand proof from people who are selling produce. And then, of course, we're going to go later on into barcoding, where you can actually use your mobile phone. We will get to that technology to be able to check where produce actually was produced and when it was purchased, and that sort of information will be in the barcode. For livestock, we have done a project with the FAO, and we are actually putting microchips in animals. Also, that project has begun between Michael James and Dr. Trotman. They can speak more to that. But under that project, we're going to be able to microchip animals so that there's a traceability. And in all of this, where we are going is to have a traceability system that allows for us to trace when animals are stolen, and equally when it comes to crops through the barcoding as well. You can at least tell where it came from at minimum. So the reality of this is that it is still a work in progress with the technology, but in terms of the legislation, which was proclaimed since last year around the same time, the implementation can be done, and the Barbados Police Service has the power to arrest and cause for anyone to be prosecuted before the courts of Barbados. Dr. Trotman, you may want to speak about the microchips, and then Michael James can also speak about what we are doing in this area.
Honourable.
Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. The trouble with the microphone. Thank you, Minister. As a reminder, Dr. Mark Trotman, Chief Veterinary Officer. We have made significant progress with the Animal Identification and Traceability Project to the point where you may have heard that we did a pilot where some of the ministry's sheep were tagged, and subsequently someone was kind enough to let us test it by stealing them, and then we were able to trace them and recover the sheep. So it's a very successful and it's a very useful tool. We are now ready to roll out the program to the farmers. We're now actually looking for farmers who want to participate in the Animal Identification Traceability Program. We have a software system that allows us to track the animals, to identify them and record them. We need the farmers. There are two ways that you can be recorded. There are two things that are done. One, either or, the animal can be microchipped and or tagged. So if you adjust to tagging, we can put tags with a unique number on it, or we can do both microchipping and tagging. And that's a permanent microchip that's on the animal. It can be either done by the veterinary services staff. If you contact us, we can come and we can come and go and tag your animals for you, or you can have a private veterinarian do the implantation, because it is a minor surgical procedure. The animal has to be implanted with a microchip in a specific location. And so we can have a private veterinarian collect the tags and get your information. There's some information you'll need to provide for us to, so we can fill the records, we can populate the record systems and so on. So the pilot was very successful. We are now ready to roll it out. We are doing cattle, sheep, and goats, and possibly pigs as well too. So those animals that will take a microchip and a tag, we can do the animal identification with those. I think that's about all I need to say about that project right now. Thank you.
Just briefly, Honourable Member, the whole issue of predatory larceny is very difficult. As the Minister said, it takes all of us really and truly to actually put some sort of dent into it. Our major focus as it relates to crops is to let persons know the sort of trouble they can get into when they go stealing other person's crops. As the Minister said, the whole issue of we might use pesticide and then somebody has stolen it and gone and sell it. Or persons can get themselves in trouble. They come up with something, you don't know where it's come from. So the whole idea of traceability becomes more important. That we're able to trace, if something happens to you, you know where you get it from. But if you get it from somebody who stole it, they may not want to tell you where they've stolen it from. And that leads to problems. What happens if you steal it then and you send it overseas? Suppose we get markets. What happens then? Okay, so this whole thing must come down to persons looking at it as an issue, is stealing. We like to predate up and call it predatory larceny, it's stealing. And if you don't, it's a societal problem, and it's something that we must address in that space. If we don't, as I said, the whole traceability will go through the chute, and we will find it difficult then to really trade when we want to actually trade not only between ourselves, but if we really want to export, that becomes a big problem.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank you for your responses.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Honourable Member of Government, Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and asks for leave to sit again. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the Standing Finance Committee until tomorrow at 10 a.m. And we will continue the head of agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move a 10-minute suspension of the House.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended for 10 minutes. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. And me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended for 10 minutes.
1, 2, 1, 1, 2. Check, systems check. 1, 2, 2.
His sitting is resumed.
Yes, sir. Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, to move the second reading of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2024.
Honourable member for St. Michael North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to move the second reading of this amendment, which on the surface appears to be a very simple amendment, and it is technically, but it will have significant impact and value as we continue to improve and enhance the operations and, of course, the service delivery relative to healthcare services within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And in essence, through this amendment, Mr. Speaker, we are seeking to abolish the post of executive chairman and reestablish the previously and more commonly known post of chief executive officer. So, Mr. Chairman, as I said, on paper, it looks like a simple changing of names and titles, and effectively, that is what it is. But it is another step in a long process towards continuous improvement that we are undertaking within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as we seek to ensure that its operations, its management structure, and of course, its delivery of healthcare services to the citizens of Barbados is at the level that we want it to be. And of course, the level that all persons at the QH, as I speak to them and interact with them, would desire to be that level of excellence. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, I don't need to convince you of the importance of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I think that goes without saying. The hospital was established in 1964 and for many years has been providing a range of services to the people of Barbados, from laboratory services through to clinical services, medical services, and assessments, evaluations. Ultimately has been taking care of the health of our nation for decades. It is an institution that is critical to the infrastructure of this country and all of the associated and connected parts of the healthcare infrastructure and network really lead right back to this, our primary acute care facility. And this institution, Mr. Speaker, oftentimes gets a lot of negative comments or commentary, generally commentary within the Barbadian context. We get a lot of negative commentary on the affairs of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I would be the first to admit that whilst we are continuing on our journey towards improvement, we are not ignorant of, we are not blind to the fact that there are a number of challenges that we need to continue to address within this particular environment. And as I reflect on the long history that we have within this institution, I would not want, even in this very simple amendment, to leave this chamber without registering for the record and publicly the fact that I applaud the hardworking and dedicated members of staff from the board through to every director, through to every single worker, employee, team member, support staff that is at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I would not want to end this very brief contribution without signaling my complete admiration and applause for the work and the dedication that they continue to demonstrate on a daily basis in the provision of healthcare within this country. And whilst it is not an easy task, it is a task that is very challenging because there are a myriad of activities that take place within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And oftentimes we sit and we may want to critique one aspect or another aspect of its operations, but there's a myriad of activities that take place within this institution, thousands of employees, moving parts, all throughout the institution from top to bottom. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that even in the midst of the challenges and the challenging environment that it is, I believe that they need to be commended for the excellent work that they're doing on a daily basis to ensure the good health of not only our people, but even the visitors to our shores. Now, this amendment, changing from the position of executive chairman to the more familiar post of chief executive officer, it really and truly, it speaks to the fact that we are continuing to look at the structures that exist within the institution, and we are adjusting as we go along to ensure that we can correct some of the issues that the QEH has experienced over the years. And it is no secret, we've had shortages relative to supplies, we've had issues relative to equipment, we've had issues relative to internal controls, we've had issues relative to accounting and financial management. We've had projects that have not gone the way that we would want them to have to go. So even as we recognize those challenges, back in 2019, this administration sought about and set about to make the adjustments to the governance structure of the QEH by changing the post of CEO to executive chairman and therefore allowing that governance position within the board of management to be able to have more direct oversight and operational oversight of the activities at the QEH. And I don't need to convince this chamber nor the people of Barbados about what we'll call now the confirmation and affirmation of what a good decision that would have been at that time. Because just after making that move in 2019 into 2020, we all know what took place. We saw the world go through what it had not experienced in over 100 years. A global pandemic that caused the entire world to reel relative to its health and wellness. So during that 2019 decision and that amendment, we would have created the post of executive chairman, but we didn't stop there. We would have created 2 additional posts as well: chief operations officer and executive director of clinical and diagnostic services. So we rode through the COVID-19 pandemic, and I must at this point in time applaud the leadership of the Ministry of Health at that time. The Honourable, the Right Honourable, I think is most honourable right now, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostate. I didn't ask for permission to mention his name, sir, but I'm saying it in a positive light, so my apologies. And of course, the Cabinet of Barbados, led by our Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael North East, the Honourable Mia Moore-Motley, and the entire team at that time that would have been the leadership of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the leadership of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, that would have safely navigated us through what was one of the most challenging health crises that the world has seen, or people alive has seen to date. And therefore, we understood the importance of making sure that we have the correct structures that fit the time. And the structures that fit the time then are not necessarily the structures that fit this time today. So many things would have taken place since the 2019 amendment of the governance structure within the QEH. Many good things that have taken place. We have had the expansion of the A&E department to better accommodate the critical and urgent emergency situations that can take place at any point in time in our country. We have had several wards that were refurbished. Even in 2023, Mr. Speaker, we had wards before C9 and C5 that were completely refurbished. We had the entire external facade of the hospital that was repainted, improved the operating theater efficiency. We would have increased the ambulance fleet to 4 ambulances. So we improved and expanded that fleet. We would have introduced, during even that time of COVID, a home delivery service for medications. And of course, we introduced, even during the time of COVID, at the peak of COVID, a help desk that we have chosen to maintain even to this day, that continues to field many of the calls that come from our citizens and helps to redirect them and assign them to the right location and give our citizens a first contact that can give them the guidance that they need when they're experiencing an emergency situation. So having successfully navigated the COVID crisis and going out from that and expanding from that to be able to improve the operational efficiencies and to make several improvements and enhancements to the delivery of services at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we are now at this point in time the government is of the view that we need to now continue the improvement and enhance the governance and management model within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to now revert to the post or the recreation of the post of Chief Executive Officer, to continue the daily drive towards operational efficiency and service delivery improvement. And whilst we understand that the name of a post is important, we do believe that the greater level of importance should be placed on the persons that will be placed in certain posts and positions. So we've embarked on a process to ensure that we find persons to fill the various managerial positions within the leadership of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital who have the requisite skill set, the requisite qualifications, and most importantly, the requisite real-world experience with leading a healthcare facility of this significance within a cultural context that is Barbados. So, sir, as I begin to close, I have earmarked and pinned a lot of this discussion on continuous improvement. And as a person who has been a part of business for many, many years, having led several businesses and the transformation and the success of those businesses over the years, there's a word that comes to mind, and that word is kaizen, sir. Kaizen is a Japanese word. It comes from Japanese business environments and contexts. And the word basically means continuous improvement or change for the better. And I believe that this amendment, once again, though on the surface being a simple reversion to the post of Chief Executive Officer, I want to frame it within the context of the continuous improvement that is taking place within the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And there will be time, Mr. Speaker, in this House to delve into the operations and a lot of the plans that we have, the strategic plans that we have to continue that improvement in a tangible way so that all of our citizens can feel it and see it. And we will discuss that even as we come into the in next week's session of Parliament. And there will be a time for fulsome debate and disclosures relative to a lot of these strategic plans. But at this point in time, I am satisfied that this amendment, and this government is satisfied that this amendment to revert to and to create the post of Chief Executive Officer is going to give us the structure in management that will help us to improve the operations, the execution of the strategic mandate of the board and of the government at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this amendment be read a second time.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mine will be a very short intervention. I note that the Honourable Member for St. Michael North kept faithful to the long title of this bill when he admitted that the bill seeks to amend a post that had previously existed, I think perhaps 2 years ago, and to return to that position in which it separates the office of Chief Executive Officer from that of Chairman. I think that's what the bill is doing. 2 years ago, when it was changed to pursue individual enfranchisement. And there is a principle in law that legislation should not be personalized. Legislation should always seek to pursue the common good. And you know, sir, that the rule of law embraces the principle that no one is above the law. And if no one is above the law, legislation should never seek to enfranchise an individual. And that's the dilemma that we reach today, that we had 2 posts under the previous legislation. Then it was amended to fuse those posts. The individual has departed, and therefore a new individual comes, and we once again bifurcate the positions, so that it appears as if Parliament is tinkering with the process of legislation. I would just say that recently I've heard around here that sometimes we become too consumed or preoccupied with law. And that is such an appalling statement to make, because we are an institution that passes law. So I don't see, if we are a lawmaking body, how we can accuse each other of being preoccupied with law. That ought to be the primary occupation of this place, to concern itself with law. And the law is that legislation should always seek to promote or pursue the common good. It is not about individual enfranchisement. In colonial times, and I don't use the word colonial as an emotive term, I can speak dispassionately as to that, and to identify colonial times as being factual, as a period prior to independence. And Parliament in those days used to appear to be enfranchising the interests of small groups. A lot of people in Barbados are not aware that the Barbados Cricket Association, for example, I think it is either 1932 or 34, the Barbados Cricket Association is a public body insofar as it was incorporated by legislation. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people believe that it is a private company registered at Corporate Affairs. That's not true. The Barbados Cricket Association is a beneficiary of a previous colonial practice of enfranchising individuals and enfranchising small groups. The law has moved beyond that, and the law concerns itself with the common good. And I am concerned that this legislation departs from the principle of the common good. It is clear that we are using the legislation as an expedience. You have somebody who is qualified for a fused position, so you change the law for that person. You have another person who may not be qualified, or indeed may not be interested in the fused position, and you amend the law. That is not, with all due respect, that is not how legislation must be used. That is not an approach to the act, the constitutional act of legislation. So that, let me hasten to add that my intervention has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do, with the quality nor qualifications of the persons involved. Certainly not the last person, certainly not this person. Has absolutely nothing to do with the quality or the qualifications of those persons. This is a point made in principle, that legislation, I repeat, must always be passed for the common good, and it must never pertain to enfranchising individuals. If it enfranchises individuals, it finds itself in breach of the rule of law, which says that no one is above the law. And anytime, I repeat again, anytime legislation appears to place individual interests above the common good, it is offending against the rule of law. So that, Your Honor, that is my intervention. It is a caution to this Parliament. It is a caution to this Parliament based on principle. And that principle remains that legislation must pertain to the common good. So that having taken that position, I must express opposition to the amendment. And I say again, I do not know the individual for whom this is being done. And while I know the individual for whom it was previously done, it does not express any commentary on the quality nor the qualification of either party. So that, Your Honor, those are my objections in principle to the use of legislation to enfranchise individuals and where there seems to be an abandonment of the principle of the common good. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Michael North, and on this legislation, which, as he has indicated, is not mere administration. It is at the very heart of an evolution that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the health sector in this country has experienced over the past few years. The fact is that when this Barbados Labour Party government came to service in 2018, we encountered a certain level of degradation, including of institutional capacity in some ways. We saw, and I won't repeat all of the various indicators of decay and decrepitude that had taken hold in a previous Democratic Labour Party administration. We experienced it all. We experienced it all in our homes, in our communities. I need not repeat numbers to reflect that. But what is important to note here is that this government had to have a certain flexibility and level of innovation with the way that we treated to our institutions. This government had to realize that in some cases, of which the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was one example, we needed to make sure that the leadership had a steady hand, as did the executive capacity of the institution. The governance needed to have a steady hand, as did the side that was executing in every area, from accident and emergency, to ambulance service, to obstetrics, to every area of service delivery to the people of Barbados. And so the determination was made at that time and discussed and debated in this honorable place. I'm not sure if on that occasion the honorable member for Christchurch South had managed to come in to ask to be marked present, or had removed his sunglasses enough to be able to read what was, long enough to be able to read what was before him. But that conversation did come to this place. And at that time, it was determined that the leadership that was needed, that was steady, that was needed was one that was steady, It was determined at that time that there were so many existential matters relating to the health and care of Barbadians, not least among them issues like pandemics. Not least among them, and you know, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael North was speaking, I reflected on the work of the former board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, of the former Minister of Health and Wellness in this country. And indeed, we had to make sure that we had all available and suitable resources in place within a governance structure that matched the time. You know, Barbados is a small place. And it is no secret that often we are faced with the fact that the person who is best equipped, who is best placed to deal with both matters of corporate governance and of execution in this case, may be somebody who sits next to us, who lives next to us, who's a member of our family. That's the reality that we deal with. And the fact is that the way that we manage that is we make sure that our corporate governance rules allow us to incorporate things like recusal from sensitive matters, because we, in a country of 270,000 people, the same people that benefit from the governance and policy and program execution are the same people that have to do it. We don't get to have an audience in this country. We have to bring all resources to bear to make sure that we cater to and care for all Barbadians. We now find ourselves in a situation where we have gone a ways, having recovered from COVID in all kinds of ways, where we have gone a ways to stabilize that sector. And we consider that having done so, we can now have a return to normalcy. This is not the only sector that is starting to enjoy that return to normalcy. And so I wanted to add my voice to this for the avoidance of doubt. This is a question of having institutions created and governance mechanisms created that are fit for purpose, that allow us to bring all of our resources to bear. If you look around, Mr. Speaker, I dare say you will find that there are other scenarios in which those who are close to us, who are Barbadians too and have a right to be able to contribute, those who are close to many members, those who are close to many Barbadians, every day, all the time, we rely on and call on their capacity to give back to this country as we should. And so, sir, I support the amendment. I think it is important that it be carried through without any cover or any insinuation of ulterior motives on the part of this government, but simply to say that having steadied the health sector, having steadied the QEH in one capacity, we are ready to go forward with the reform in other ways. And with that, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank both honourable members for their contributions. And just to pick up where the honourable member for St. Michael's South Central would have left off, to reiterate that this legislation cannot be couched in a view of individual enfranchisement. In fact, I think that the honourable leader of the opposition, if he were paying attention closely to what I was saying for the entire short presentation that I made, was that this is really about the institution being improved so that the common good of all Barbadians can be enhanced. The entire change in this amendment to the QEH bill really is about ensuring that the people of Barbados can get the best quality care from the institution known as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And that is why we are doing this as a part of the continuous improvement to the institution. We recognize that with all organizations, change is important. And if there's one thing that the people of Barbados can identify, can acknowledge, can recognize from the way that this Barbados Little Party runs its affairs is that we are not too big or not afraid to make changes where they are necessary or essential for the good of the people of Barbados. So just as I close, to reiterate and to underscore, this is legislation that is for the common good. This is all that we are trying to do at this point in time, is to ensure that the institution has the best possible chance to deliver on its mandate and to ensure the people of Barbados have the best possible healthcare service possible. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to beg to move that this legislation be read, this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Committee or? That you leave, Chair? Okay. With that, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 3 stand part.
Second.
The question is that clauses 1 to 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. We think the ayes have it.
Clauses 4 to 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 4 to 6 stand part.
Second.
The question is that clauses 4 to 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you report the passage of one bill in committee to the Speaker. I beg leave for him to sit again.
The question is that I do not report the passing of one bill in committee to His Honour the Speaker. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. We think the ayes have it.
Honourable member, Sir Michael North.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Second.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill now be passed and cited as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Act 2024.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Second.
The question is that this Honourable Chamber be suspended until Wednesday at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands suspended until Wednesday, the 6th day of March 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.